Before Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, before the name of Rome made the world tremble, there was a man who ruled the city with a weapon more powerful than the sword: money. His name was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was acclaimed for his cunning, feared for his ambition, and ultimately remembered for his tragic end. This is the story of the richest man in Rome, and how his thirst for glory led him to a cruel death in the desert arenas. But to understand his fall, we must first know his rise. Crassus was born in 115 BC into one of the oldest and most prestigious families of Rome, the Licinius gens. It was a patrician family, meaning part of the hereditary elite that governed Rome since its earliest days. His father, Publius Licinius Crassus, was consul and censor, positions that not only granted political power, but also a place of great honor and respect. From a young age, Marcus was educated to lead. He studied with the best rhetoricians, learned law, philosophy, and above all, political strategy. But his childhood was not peaceful. While he grew up, Rome entered one of its most turbulent periods. At the end of the 2nd century BC, Rome was divided into two irreconcilable factions. On one side were the populares, who sought reforms for the people, and on the other the optimates, defenders of the privileges of the Senate and the elite. These tensions were not only ideological, they were bloody. The streets of Rome filled with daggers, intrigues, and purges. And amid this storm, young Crassus learned his first great lesson. In Rome, politics was not done with words, it was done with blood. In 87 BC, everything changed. General Gaius Marius, leader of the populares, took the city by force along with his ally Cinna. What followed was a brutal hunt. Crassus's father, a defender of the opposite side, was executed. His brother too. The family's properties were confiscated. His name was stained. Marcus, barely 28 years old, had to flee for his life. Overnight, he went from being one of Rome's most powerful heirs to a fugitive. He took refuge in Hispania, where his family still owned lands. It was there, in exile, that Crassus first showed what would make him legendary. He did not lament. He did not seek immediate revenge. He focused on rebuilding. In Hispania, Crassus began to weave alliances. He hired soldiers, established networks of influence, managed estates, and little by little, he recovered part of his former fortune. He was not driven by pride. He was driven by a clear goal: to return to Rome stronger than ever. His opportunity came when General Lucius Cornelius Sulla, enemy of Marius, returned from Asia intending to take Rome. Crassus did not hesitate for a second to side with him. He provided troops, contact, and above all, money. He knew that if Sulla won, his enemies would fall, and he could keep everything they had left behind. Sulla's victory was bloody but decisive, and to punish the enemies of the regime, he established a fearsome mechanism: the proscriptions. It was a blacklist. Anyone on it was declared a traitor. They could be executed without trial, and their property confiscated. This is where Crassus made his masterstroke. Not only did he support the proscriptions, he financed them. He bought confiscated properties at ridiculous prices: houses, land, slaves, villas, palaces. Some days he bought entire neighborhoods of Rome. While the people cried, Crassus bought. And while the Senate feared, Crassus accumulated. His fortune became so immense that no one could calculate it accurately. Some say he owned more than 200 million sesterces, others claim he owned a third of Rome. But Crassus did not stop there. Fire was a recurring problem in Rome. Narrow streets, wooden houses, rudimentary facilities. And Crassus turned it into another business. He founded his own private fire brigade. But they were not heroes, and they were extortionists. When a house caught fire, they arrived, but not to put out the fire. They offered to buy it. If the owner accepted the very low price, and then they acted. If not, they let it burn to the ground. He was ruthless, he was brilliant, and it was legal. With his fortune already consolidated, Crassus did not only seek wealth. He wanted something that was not easily bought: recognition. He wanted Rome's respect, military prestige, the applause of the masses, but he still lacked something: an epic victory, a war, an enemy worthy of him. And that enemy was about to come. Rome did not only fear external invasions, It also feared internal rebellion, and nothing terrified more than the slave revolt led by Spartacus, a gladiator, a slave who gathered tens of thousands and directly challenged Rome's power. The city trembled and the Senate was desperate. Several legions had fallen against this rebel army. Rome needed a man, someone who could stop the storm. The Senate looked to Crassus. That man who amassed riches, yes, but also had a reputation for discipline and brutality. Crassus accepted command. He knew this was his chance to gain the military glory he lacked. He took control of 40,000 soldiers, battered and demoralized legions. He imposed iron discipline. He revived decimation, a brutal practice where 1 in 10 deserters was executed, the law of terror, but also of order. But Crassus was not only cruel, he was strategic. He knew Spartacus was a clever leader, and a frontal clash could be fatal. So he chose the siege tactic. He built a fortification blocking passage to the north, isolating the rebels in the south. For months, hunger and despair wore down the slaves. Spartacus tried to break the siege several times but was rejected. In 71 BC, everything reached a critical point. On the banks of the Saro River, Crassus and Spartacus faced off in a battle that would decide Rome's fate. Although Spartacus fought bravely, he was defeated and killed in combat. But his body was never found, giving rise to legends. To send a clear and terrifying message, Crassus ordered the crucifixion of 6,000 surviving slaves along the Appian Way. A brutal display that showed Rome would not tolerate challenges. The victory over Spartacus catapulted Crassus into a new sphere: politics. His fortune and prestige allowed him to compete with other greats like Pompey. But in Rome, power was not easily shared. Pompey, with his triumphs against pirates and in Hispania, was more popular. Caesar, though young, was beginning to shine with charisma and skill. Not to be left behind, Crassus formed an alliance that would change Rome forever. Together with Pompey and Caesar, he created the first triumvirate in 60 BC, an unofficial but powerful alliance. Each brought something essential. Crassus, the money, Pompey the military muscle, and Caesar the charisma and political talent. This alliance allowed them to manipulate the Senate and Roman politics in their favor. Crassus financed campaigns and secured million-dollar contracts in the eastern provinces, further increasing his wealth. But this alliance was fragile. Crassus and Pompey never overcame their rivalry, and Caesar's unstoppable rise threatened their position. Crassus was the least charismatic, the least militarily decorated. He was the man of money, which brought him envy and disdain. Despite this, he maintained his influence with cunning, using wealth and politics to stay in power. However, Crassus yearned for more than money and political power. He desired a great military victory that would eclipse his rivals. He sought to prove he was not just a banker behind the throne, but a leader worthy of Rome. Thus was born his ambitious and fatal campaign against the Parthian Empire. After his political and military success, Crassus sought one last feat: to conquer the Parthians. The Parthian Empire was a formidable rival in the east, wealthy and with a fearsome army. For Crassus, a victory there would mean ultimate glory, capable of rivaling Pompey and Caesar. But from the start, the campaign was filled with doubt and mistrust. Many in Rome suspected Crassus sought loot more than the Republic's good. Even Cicero openly criticized his boundless ambition. In 55 BC, Crassus was appointed governor of Syria, a perfect base for his offensive. He gathered an impressive army, 7 legions, about 50,000 men, plus Gallic cavalry and auxiliaries. Confident in Roman numerical superiority and discipline, he marched east, crossing the Euphrates River. But he did not know he would face an enemy mastering tactics unknown to Rome. The Parthian commander, Surena, was a military genius. He knew Roman tactics and used the terrain to his advantage, the desert and arid lands. His army, though smaller in number, had 2 decisive weapons: heavy cavalry, cataphracts, armored and capable of powerful charges, and mounted archers who shot arrows with precision while galloping, avoiding direct contact. Surena employed constant movement warfare, attacking and retreating without letting Rome form its famous lines. When Crassus crossed the Euphrates and met the Parthian army, the nightmare began. His legions, used to close combat, were bombarded by relentless arrows. Every advance attempt was stopped by cataphract charges and volleys of projectiles. Fatigue, heat, and lack of supplies began to affect the Roman troops. At a critical moment, Crassus's son, Publius Licinius Crassus, commander of the cavalry, launched a desperate attack to break enemy lines. But he was surrounded and annihilated. Publius's death was a devastating blow to Crassus and his troops. Morale collapsed. The trapped legions began to fall into disorder. Thousands fell or were captured. Of the 50,000 soldiers, over 30,000 died or were prisoners. Crassus, wounded in body and spirit, tried to negotiate retreat, but fate had prepared the cruelest betrayal. During negotiations, the Parthians betrayed and killed Crassus. According to historian Plutarch, his death was marked by a terrible humiliation. The Parthians poured molten gold into his mouth, symbolizing his insatiable greed, a death that went down in history as the greatest Roman military disgrace. The defeat and death of Crassus shook Rome to its foundations. The balance within the triumvirate broke. Without Crassus to mediate, the rivalry between Pompey and Caesar escalated out of control. Rome headed toward new civil wars. The campaign that should have led Crassus to glory ended in his fall, and a humiliating blow to Roman prestige. The story of Crassus is a powerful reminder. Ambition without prudence can turn the most powerful man into the most tragic victim. Gold can buy everything except loyalty and sure victory. With Crassus's death, Rome lost not only a general and magnate, but the key factor balancing power between Caesar and Pompey. Without Crassus to mediate, tensions exploded. Pompey, renowned for his military prestige and popularity, began consolidating absolute control. Caesar, increasingly powerful in Gaul, saw Pompey as an ever more dangerous rival. The triumvirate, which seemed an unbreakable alliance, quickly fell apart. Rome was heading once again toward civil war. Although Crassus did not survive to see the Republic's end, his influence remained. His fortune financed campaigns, his example showed the dangers of unchecked ambition. His story served as a lesson for those who came after, that power without strategy can be fleeting and tragic. Moreover, his role in the proscriptions and ruthless accumulation of wealth left an indelible mark on Rome. Many hated him, others feared him, but no one could ignore him. Was Crassus a hero, a villain, or simply a man caught in the whirlwind of his era? His life blends greatness and tragedy. He was a visionary who used money as a weapon, a strategist who understood economic power before many, but also a man blinded by greed. In the end, his story is not only a chapter of Rome, but an eternal reflection on power, ambition, and human fragility. Today, more than 2,000 years later, his story remains relevant. How far are we willing to go for power or wealth? When? Does ambition cease to be a virtue and become a danger? The story of Crassus invites us to answer these questions. If this story of power, glory, and downfall caught your attention, don't forget to like to support this type of content. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of Rome's history, and hit the bell so YouTube notifies you whenever we upload a new video. I also leave here on screen a suggestion for another video you'll love if you want to keep discovering the secrets of the Roman Empire. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time. See you in the next episode.